know, maybe we are missing two panelists, but we've got three of you here. So let's start with the introductions, and we'll just adapt from there. So I'd love for each of you to just take a couple minutes, introduce yourself, and share with us from your perspective why prioritizing safe and inclusive classrooms for all kids is important to you. Esai, do you want to start maybe? Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
So, hello everyone. My name is Esai Castaneda. He, him pronouns. I work at United Way, and I am a current student at the University of Utah. I was born and raised here in West Valley City. I attended schools within the Grand School District from my K through 12. I graduated from Granger in 2020. And so growing up in Utah schools, safety and inclusivity have always been really important to me, because in my personal experience, I have felt what it's like to not be included or to not feel like a sense of belonging within schools. And this started when I was very young. When I was in elementary school, I moved. My parents, we moved houses. We went from West Valley City, and we went to the outskirts of West Valley City, past Kearns. And in this area, there wasn't many Latinx students there, and not a lot of students that I felt I could be comfortable with. And so I struggled a lot with that in my early years and through junior high. I didn't really feel comfortable until I got to my high school years at Granger and participated in many clubs in LA. And it was up until that point that I felt comfortable and felt like I could be my full self and pursue the things I wanted to. And so going through that, I also ended up working with United Way. And with United Way, I met students who struggled to feel inclusive within their own classrooms. And I saw how that affected them and their opportunities that they could pursue. And so I personally want to see students have a better experience than what I could have had or what I've seen others have. And to get past those experiences, to have opportunities to go into higher education and to be able to pursue higher education as well.
Bill, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. That's so embarrassing. You would think I would know better. Brian, let's turn to you. Have you take a couple minutes to introduce yourself and answer the same question. Why is it important to prioritize safe and inclusive classrooms for all kids?
Thanks for the opportunity. So my name is Brian Yazzie. I'm the Diversity and Equity Coordinator for the Provo City School District. I'm originally from Arizona. I am a member of the Navajo tribe, but I'm also part Hopi. Spent a big part of my life living in Arizona, and my career, I guess you can say, has been advocating for youth for over 30 years. Majority of it focused on Native American youth. Had the privilege of spending a lot of my time, a lot of my professional work within the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Before moving to Utah, a little over 5 years ago, I was the National Director of Native Services for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. So this type of work has been, I guess, a big part of who I am and what I try to do of creating safe places for kids and to help them to bring the best of who they are and helping them to develop to become responsible, caring adults. And so that's been a big part of my focus and having the opportunity of working with a lot of different people from around the country, especially again, focusing on Native American youth, to create that type of environment within the clubs that I was responsible for. And now as I transitioned into education and now focused into diversity, equity, and inclusion here in Provo, the same values, the same goals are still there. As we look at Provo as itself, when I first started here in this position, the percentage of students of color here in Provo, we were about a little over 26%. In 5 years, we're now close to 41% of students of color, which is quite significant. And a lot of it is the result of the healthy economy that we have here in the state of Utah. We have people moving here for the job opportunities, the quality of life that we have, which are all wonderful things. But with that now comes the diversity. The how can we as a school district meet the needs of a diverse population? We have many students, many Latino students, and students of different parts of the world, as we have more refugees that are moving into our community. So again, how can we come together and work together as a community is definitely the challenge. But I feel like as a school district, we have the opportunity of building bridges and bringing people together, working together for the welfare of our students. And so it's a position that I value. It's 5 years is a very short time to develop what we're doing. But I think that as I share with you later on in this discussion, some of the things that we're doing here in Provo, I'm very optimistic with the programs and the initiatives that we're creating here to build those bridges. And so anyway, I'm just again excited to be a part of this discussion. So thank you.
Thank you for your work and for being here. Welcome, Steve. Doing some introductions. We'll go to Senator Weiler next to introduce himself and then answer this first question about why it's important to create and prioritize creating safe and inclusive classrooms.
Thank you, Bill. So I'm Todd Wyler. I'm a state senator. I live in Woods Cross, which is in the Davis School District. And I'm also a practicing attorney, and I'm a long-term board member. All four of my kids are now adults as of last year, and all four of them graduated from the Davis School District, specifically Woods Cross High School. I was very saddened to learn of some of the anecdotal experiences and some of the results of the Department of Justice's investigation of the Davis School District, where my kids went to school. That wasn't our experience going through the Davis School District. Of course, we're not minorities, obviously, but well, obviously for me, you can't see my kids, but I think it's important that every child can, feel safe in school, and we need. I would just want to echo what the others before me have said. We need that environment so that education can prosper without kids feeling bullied or threatened or under attack or in any way made to feel like they are different or maybe even not as good as some of their classmates. And so I'm looking forward to working with United Way and Representative Sandra Hollins this session that starts 1 week from today on trying to take some of what we've learned in Davis County and try to bring that throughout the state to all of the school districts.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator. And Steve, we'll wrap up introductions with you for now, unless I know Sandra Hollins is attempting to get in. It's a little bit tricky. But Steve, tell us about yourself and why you believe it's important to prioritize this issue.
Absolutely. Thank you. So Steve Swensen is my name. I'm a Bountiful resident and have had kids that went through the Davis school system and currently have 2 boys that are in elementary school. And, through the years, well, and I guess I should back up and let you know, I have 2 biological children, and I've had 4 children of color go through the Davis School District. And that's a unique experience. As a white dad to Black kids, their challenges are different than any of mine that I had when attending school. And my involvement came long before the recent report about racism in the Davis School District. And sadly, that is an experience that our older kids, our older daughters experienced, through the years. Now, I think a lot of it is not, intentional racism, perhaps. Some certainly is, and that's even more deplorable. But for the unintentional comments, I think that's where being involved, being aware, and really taking an active role. I've done it just as a father who sees some of the challenges that my kids go through firsthand. But I think it's the kind of thing that every parent needs to be thinking about, and striving to cultivate an environment at home that is understanding and looking for ways to include others who might feel left out. So that's why I'm here today, and look forward to our conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Well, Brian, let's start with you as an educator in a school system. It's clear that teachers have had a deeply challenging time for the last couple of years, just trying to educate kids in a pandemic. But it's also true that teachers find themselves on shifting ground when it comes to their own awareness about racism, about what's allowed and not allowed in terms of addressing and creating safe and inclusive climates in school. Tell us about how some of those challenges show up in your world, and what some of the approaches you're taking in Provo are to support both kids and educators around inclusion and safety.
Well, I think Mr. Swensen made a comment, awareness. I think awareness is a big part of understanding what the climate is, what is diversity, equity, inclusion, what is, if you break those three words down, what does that mean for me as an educator in my classroom? What does that mean for a district? Every one of our communities are different. Provo, you look here in Utah County at Provo, Orem, Springerville, all of these different places, they're all very different. They're all unique, even though we can sometimes think they're all the same. So it's developing, and building upon the culture of that community. And that's been kind of our focus here in Provo, is looking at the uniqueness of our community, the people here, the values that's been here, that's been established, and how can we build upon that, but then understanding the changes that are taking place, the ongoing changes, the different cultures, the religious faith, a lot of different things now are not the same. And as I mentioned, just the demographics of our district. I mean, what our district looked like 5 years ago is now different. And so what can we do? What as a district, what can we do to bridge those, those groups together? And I think one of the things that I saw when I started here was just the communication was something that needed to be better. And so one of the big things that we did to kind of help us understand those differences is we created 6 advisory committees. These are advisory committees that are what we call our multicultural advisory committees, to kind of help give our families an opportunity to help us understand those needs, those differences. So our advisory committees, we have one for our Latino families, our Native American, our Pacific Islanders, our Asian, our Black families, and our LGBTQIA families. And with this, in the 3.5 years that we've had these committees, we've been able to look at some of our policies and have input from our advisory committees to help us change and create new policies to help us to better serve our kids, to make sure that we're not that we're respecting who they are as people. And this also includes our employees. When I say a district, we want to make sure that we're encompassing not only our students, but the employees, our teachers, our administrators, and our parents in this discussion. How can we as a district be more open to understand those differences? And so these committees have really made an impact in that. We also created a diversity and equity community council. This is a piece that I think is really important because now it brings the community to be a part of of the discussion. So we have a variety of nonprofits, community leaders, so our stakeholders, our universities here in the Provo area, some of our teachers, administrators, parents make up this council. And so again, we come together and we talk. We have discussions on maybe some issues that we need to address. They provide some possible solutions, and those solutions are discussed within the district. And we've been able to implement a lot of those recommendations that this committee has made. So again, it's bringing people and their perspectives together to help us, where it's just not the district deciding what's best for everybody, but it's bringing everybody to the table. And so having those discussions, I think, are critical. So other things that we've been trying to do is create a variety of different trainings to give the tools to our teachers how to work and understand the various cultures that we have, that students from their classroom. But we also want to make sure that the discussion of diversity and equity is not just solely focused on race. Diversity and equity includes all different types of groups and people. We have our students of our disabilities, students with disabilities, our single parent, our English learners, single parents, low income. These are all groups and demographics that are all part of diversity and equity. And I think sometimes when we talk about diversity, when the word diversity comes up, it immediately goes to race. And so all the discussion is focused on that. But we got to remember that it encompasses everybody. Diversity and equity is about all people, all of our students. And so the word all is used a lot in our district because we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of everybody that is part of our district, because that is the community, that's the family environment that we're trying to create here within our district. So with that, I think it has helped to help our teachers to understand some of the misconceptions that have happened. When different things come up, at least we have a variety of groups now that we can go to, that we can get feedback and get that advice from them, and how we can do better and how a teacher can do better. And I think that has helped with the communication within some of our schools. Now, we're not perfect, again, this is something that we're still developing and still growing, but it gives us a good foundation of building communication, because I think communication is the key to help in, again, bringing people to the table and developing those bridges.
Sounds like you've done a lot to build awareness and communication by bringing the voices of people into the system, and that's super, super important. I'm curious, Esai, about your experience as a student, just like seeing people who you relate to or who look like you as teachers or administrators, and what's your sense about the state of our education system when it comes to its own diversity and inclusion, the people who are in the system?
As a student growing up through grad school district, I actually felt there was a lack of diversity within the system. I have a hard time even trying to remember one teacher who was Latinx, much less BIPOC in general. I have a hard time trying to remember. My personal experience has mostly been with white teachers and white coaches in sports, and that has always impacted me as a student attempting to participate within the sport or having a hard time participate within the classroom. It creates a disconnect because I don't feel like my situation is fully understood. And I feel that, and I have heard from students that their situations are also not fully understood by teachers and maybe and educators in general. It could be the administration. And I feel like that disconnect can be remedied by having an understanding between each other, allowing students a space to speak on their experiences within the classrooms, to have that space with teachers, allowing that with administrators and counselors who care about their cultural ideas and all their identities, because that is something that is lacking within the school system. And it makes it hard for students to really feel comfortable.
The legislature took this up in an interesting way. I think, I don't know, Senator Weiler, if you're familiar with this particular bill, but there's this concept of grow your own educator, of communities sort of drawing from within, or schools drawing from within their own communities and helping para-educators and teachers' aides, for example, get their teaching credentials. And one of the goals of that bill is to help the teaching faculty of our state look more like the student population. Do you recall or have a sense of the dialogue at the legislature that brought that about?
I don't. I'm sorry, Bill. I do think, we tend to, those of us along the Wasatch Front kind of tend to think about schools and education along Salt Lake, but we have a lot of rural areas. We have a lot of, disconnected communities where, you can't always wait for someone else to come in from outside and do that. So I think that was part of the impetus of the bill.
I'll just note that in the chat there are some comments just recognizing that what Brian said about the broadest definition of inclusion, particularly around students with disabilities, super important to keep top of mind, and the same principle applies. It seems like if whatever that aspect of ourselves is, if we don't see people like us in the positions of teacher and administrator and principal and superintendent and school board member, that has an effect on us, as Esai described. Steve, I want to turn to you and just ask, as a parent of kids in school right now, how can other parents like you who are concerned about the environment of inclusivity or lack of inclusivity, how can they get involved?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bill. I think every parent can get involved. And certainly there's the public ways. You can, be active in your PTA in your local school and make a positive contribution that way. Even if you're not actively involved in your PTA, influencing when PTA meetings are held it can be a positive influence. For example, if they are only held during the workday, that excludes a whole portion of the population that simply can't attend because they've got a job that's not flexible enough to allow them to be there. So making sure that the meetings are in the late afternoon or even evenings, if possible, and ensuring that all voices are being represented. I think it's notable that, as you mentioned, Bill, there's at least an initiative to try to grow your own, diversity within your school so that your school matches what it might look like. But I think, without having to put those, influencers or diversity champions inside the schools in an administrative capacity, you can do that as parents. And I am not diverse, much as Senator Weiler said. I can only relate as I try to see through the eyes of others, but ensuring that those that do reflect the diversity of your school are able to participate in the PTA, I think is a critical element. So that's at the school level. Now, what can you do as a parent at home? Well, as children have the opportunity to give a report or study some topic, encourage them to find and choose the topic that is outside of what they might necessarily identify with. Be that race, be that gender, or anything else. Understanding the struggle that someone else has had as part of the school process, I think is critical. And by encouraging your child to, choose a Black person to write their paper about, it allows someone else to be in that class aside from, say, my boys, who everyone assumes, oh, you'll probably choose a Black person, right? No, my son, he chose, Walt Disney, because that's who interested him. So, looking outside of what might be the most comfortable or easily approachable role and topic that your kids might choose is another way to help. And, the bottom line is education begins at home. There's so much that every parent can do to talk about these kind of things with their kids. I thought, Brian put it very well that, yes, we do talk about race quite a bit, but what about the neurodiverse kids in a class? Helping your kids understand that there might be a reason that someone gets more agitated or bursts out in class, and helping them understand that others might not have the challenges that they do. And then obviously, since I think race is a pretty core element of this conversation, understanding that kids need to have a safe place to be able to talk about it, to ask questions. What's kind of interesting, if not stunning to me, is I have relatives who have only in the past year or so talked with their kids about race, about, the conversation that the larger country is actively having. And the reason I guess that's so surprising to me is that, these cousins grew up with Black cousins, my kids. And, it's nice to think that we can say, oh, I don't see color. But at the end of the day, that's just really not true. Color and diversity and, gender awareness and everything else that goes with it is something that kids begin to interpret and identify very early, and making sure that you're able to talk about that at home so that you've had those sensitive conversations. And if something comes up, addressing them at home rather than letting them become an issue in the school environment. I think those are all things that every parent can and should do. And just one final comment, since in my introduction, I mentioned that I'm in the Davis School District. I think Davis School District, it's wonderful that a longer study was done, that some of the issues that existed were brought to light. I don't think Davis School District is unique. I think every school district probably has these challenges and struggles. And so this message is not just for areas where it's obvious that, oh, there's a diversity issue and I need to address it. These kind of issues are everywhere in every school. And I think we've already touched on all the different ways that we might see diversity around us, and making sure that everyone acknowledges that we all have bias. It's okay. But just recognizing it, acknowledging it, and being able to talk about it, that's what's most important.
Senator Weiler, let's come to you and with a first question, which is sort of the link between you're responsible as a state senator, not only to think about education, but to think about our economy, to think about our state's growth. As you think about and interact with business leaders who might want to come to Utah or expand their business in Utah, how does this show up for them, this question of diversity and inclusion in Utah? How does that then show up in the halls of the Capitol in discussions about public policy?
Bill, the legislature, unfortunately, is filled with a lot of imperfect people trying to do their best. And we are a part-time legislature, which means, myself and most of my colleagues have full-time jobs that we're doing outside of the session. You might be surprised. I don't get contacted by a lot of business people who are thinking of moving to Utah. We have people at GoEd and people at Teresa Foxley's outfit that do that, 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week, 5 days a week all year long. Occasionally that will happen, but I will say this, I think that Utah is known for a lot of good things. And I think that, in terms of being racially diverse and ethnically diverse, that's probably not one of the things that's considered one of our strengths. I mean, I think it's changing, and I welcome that change, and I want to help facilitate that change in every healthy way possible. I also think that, what we try to do at the legislature is we try to be business friendly. We try to kind of set a foundation for businesses to build on. And, in Utah, our approach has never been that the government has all the answers and the government should solve every problem. But we want to make sure that that we have a business friendly environment, and we kind of let organically, the rest take care of itself. So I'm not sure if that's the answer you're looking for, but I want to do the right thing, and hopefully, we're moving in the right direction.
So I'll be clear. I'm not trying to draw a particular answer out of anybody, but that's helpful to hear. And it also prompted a question in the chat, which I'm going to take a few more minutes just to ask a couple more questions, and then those of you who are in the audience, please do feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We'll try to get to as many of them as possible, and yeah, we'll open it up a little bit. Esai, I want to come back to the student perspective on all this, because lots of times adults do things and the voice of young people isn't necessarily at the table. And wondering, how have you seen young people, students in school, working to create more inclusive environments?
I've seen students in schools working to create more inclusive environments when it related to their own personal identities. So in my personal experience, when I was in high school, I felt students within the organization of Latinos in Action were very vocal and participated a lot within the club. And within this club, the students participated as leaders, as presidents, as vice presidents, and they very much appreciated being in the club and being acknowledged. And I think that's something that students have been very passionate about and have been pushing towards creating this sense of belonging. But really it's for their own identity, and not really within other identities that may exist. For example, for Latinos in Action, it was really for Latinos, and it wasn't for other identities, the Black community, the Pacific Islander community. It wasn't any other identity. And I think the issue with that is that students feel that that is their only safe space within schools. And these safe spaces have only been through clubs, and the schools themselves have not actually acknowledged the students' identities. These identities can be acknowledged in various ways, and it's not just clubs that force students into just a single identity or a single way to participate in schools. These identities can be acknowledged within the classroom. Students can voice their experiences that are relevant to conversations and can be relevant to conversations within the classroom. And educators and lesson plans can be catered towards students that represent them and their identities within the lesson plan. And this way, students can feel acknowledged within the school and can participate in a broad spectrum of clubs and not just one singular club. When I was in Latinos in Action, that was the only club I felt welcomed in and felt like I could truly participate and be a part of. It was hard for me to try to join other clubs that I could get involved with in school and gain a bigger sense of belonging. It wasn't until I felt very comfortable within the school and within Latinos in Action that I was able to pursue these other clubs. And I know that these identities are far-reaching, and they are broad, as we had talked about earlier, as Brian had mentioned. But I also want to touch on how my research impacted students' identities. So at United Way, I created a project called Academic Identities that focused on students' self-perception in a school system, specifically a tracking system of core and honors. And within these core and honor systems, students very much felt disconnected between each other. And this was seen mostly between the core students I had gone in a focus group with and my AP students. They felt that there was this antagonism between each other, and that that their identities were very negative. Within my AP focus group and my AP interview, the overwhelming identity that the student believed core students had was that they were less driven, less committed within schools. And this is something that many students have, and that many students perceive as that other students have. So students believe, have these misconceptions from the very beginning, and they apply those to other students, and students are not oblivious and they understand these identities. And it very much impacts them. Some students even mentioned feeling discriminated against racially. And the interesting about that was that students were uncomfortable naming this, uncomfortable naming their racial identity. They will, when I asked them to elaborate more on it, the students were always on edge. They didn't want to say it. And instead they would say, well, I don't want to say it is racial. And so they really almost basically gaslighted themselves into thinking that they were all equal, and that the discrimination wasn't real. But it was very real for these students, and there was more than one way that they were discriminated against in the school system. And I also want to touch on how students really felt between educators. I believe it's important to mention this. Educators, although this may be they may have meant it or not meant it, the words they use against students really persuaded students to, made students feel that their identity was one of being dumb, which is the word they use themselves. They felt dumb within the school system because of the words that had been used as educator and the experiences they had. And that became their identity, that they were incapable of doing something. And yet, when I talked to them about how they felt about courses like math, the students were very open about saying that it was easy and that they could do it, and that they would be willing to take calculus. And so this led me to ask them what would make them be more comfortable within the school system. And this was a one-on-one tutoring and one-on-one time with the teacher to really be able to connect with students, because students were afraid to ask questions. And so the students mentioned to me that if they felt comfortable, they knew that if they were comfortable and they knew they were maybe wrong, that they could ask questions to other students or the teacher. And so I think it's really important that this leads on to recognizing students' situations as well, because every student has different situations outside of school, and that teachers and other students aren't very aware of. In my personal experience within high school, when I was in track and field, we had an experience where the coach kind of pushed back on us and said that we weren't really trying our hardest, and that we needed to try more, and that we had a West Side mentality. And the issue with this is that right after that practice, my dad told me he couldn't pick me up. And so my friend said I could go to his house and wait until my dad could pick me up. And when I was at my friend's house, he offered me food. And when he opened the fridge, it was the emptiest fridge I have ever seen. And when I asked him about why it was empty, he told me that his family did not have time to really go out and buy groceries, and that his mom brought food from work. And he was working from 5 to 12, closing the stores at a restaurant. And he just didn't have time for homework. He didn't have time to rest his body for track and field. So it really put the perspective that students' individual situations aren't being recognized within the school system. They aren't being recognized by educators. And that was just the reality that I faced. And I realized how hard my friend was working to sustain his family, to help pay bills. But that wasn't being recognized by the coach, and wasn't being recognized by educators, because they said, well, we're not working hard enough. But that's not the full reality of students and their situation. And that wasn't the reality of my friend's identity.
I'll point out one of the questions that's come in, or one of the observations that's come in, is the value of conversations like this and awareness like the research that you did for just helping people understand each other and see commonalities and understand each other's experience. We are going to run out of time. Let me just warn you, we've got 20 minutes left, but it's not enough to spend an hour talking about such important and complicated and interrelated issues. So just heads up, we're not going to get to everything, but I want to pivot a little bit. A couple of times, Steve, you and Senator Weiler both mentioned kind of recent news and events that were specifically occurred and made newsworthy in Davis School District and Davis County. But I think you, Steve, said clearly that's not unique to Davis School District, and the issues of harassment or discrimination or the creation of unsafe environments or the allowance of unsafe environments to continue happens anywhere. Brian, I wonder if you could share with us, without the spotlight of a news story, just how you've seen districts be proactive in trying to create an environment of safety and inclusion, how you've seen, and then maybe what are some of the hurdles we still need to tackle as a state?
Well, Bill, I mean, this work is not new. I mean, this diversity, equity, inclusion has been around for a long time. I think it's what is the best approach for a district and a community to do, and I've had the opportunity to travel when I was with the Boys and Girls Club. My focus was on clubs, but I had the opportunity to meet a lot of superintendents, a lot of educators, because education and Boys and Girls Clubs went together, after school programs. So you had to work together. And so, you go up to up in the northern states, a lot of the Native American students up there were dealing with racism. And so schools were trying to get people to the table, and some school districts, did a great job, and some school districts, it was just something that they didn't want to think about or worry about. But then you go, different parts of the country, in Arizona, there's one particular community, and it's a community that I worked in. We had a graduation rate of 23% for this particular community, and a lot of it was because of an outside community where a lot of these, and this was a tribal community that was very close to a metropolitan city there in Arizona, and this particular border community didn't want Native American kids anymore in their school district because they felt that they were bringing their test scores down. And so they informed the tribe that we don't want your kids anymore, and that really developed some really hard feelings. Whereas another school district opened up and said, "Okay, we'll work with you, tribe." But it took a lot of time and a lot of effort as communities to come together to help bring the quality of education up and to bridge communities together, because a lot of hard feelings were developed, a lot of mistrust. But when you have school districts that are willing to kind of think out of the box, again, to try to bridge that gap and to bridge people coming to have those discussions, it goes a long ways. And I think that's where the discussion part of it is really important, to where people need to just kind of slow down, and realize that we're all human beings. We definitely have emotions, we have ideas, but I think sometimes we just tend to want to push whatever agenda we may have, or whatever we want to accomplish, and we want it now. And sometimes now, is going to take some time, but as you kind of work together collectively and find, some common ground, then I think it helps. Now, kind of going to what we're doing here in Provo, education is a big part of that. to bridge that what I keep talking about is developing bridges. We started the speaker series events last year. And what these speaker series events basically is helping our community here in Provo to kind of better understand the cultures of our district. And so we actually created a YouTube channel, our own diversity, Provo City School District Diversity and Equity. So all of these speaker series that we've done, are on this channel. And it's kind of similar to this. I invited people to come and we talk and have a variety of different questions about the culture of that particular group, whatever that month is. So for example, this past year, we did our first one was on Hispanic Heritage Month. We did in September, and we did another one on Native American Heritage Month in November. We have one coming up next month on Black African American heritage. And so what is happening that I'm seeing is as people have tuned in, they're learning about different cultures or learning about the people in a different way than maybe what the stereotype was maybe in their mind or whatever that may be. And this is not just about educating white families or white individuals. This is also educating a variety of people. Myself as a Native American, these advisory committees that we created, I've had the opportunity to learn about Pacific heritage, Pacific Islander heritage and Asian heritage and so forth. And it's been amazing as I've been able to learn about these different cultures, but also to learn about LGBTQ. Now, I think Steve talked about our biases. We have to be very open about that. We all have biases. Everybody that's listening to this or everybody that's on this screen, we all have biases, and we can't avoid it. We can't ignore it. We can't say that it's not there, but we have to do something about it if we want to build that community, that sense of community, that togetherness that we're all trying to talk about, or family, our own individual families. We all have different personalities and we all kind of create our biases. And so how do we overcome that? Well, first of all, you have to admit what I do have. And like I said, I mentioned the LGBTQ, and I'll share this real quick because I know we're out of time. That was one of the things that I had to overcome because I have to openly admit that was one of my biases. When I took this position, I had to face those questions of, okay, those are things that I have to deal with and I have to find solutions. And so I went to folks, the various nonprofits and develop a relationship with a lot of these nonprofits that serve the LGBTQ community. And I had to learn from why, and actually had to come up with some harsh realities that, these were the reasons why I developed these biases. And so a lot of self-reflection, but if you don't do that, then you can't create that healing, to be able to bring people together or develop those bridges or develop that open dialogue communication. And so, I really encourage people to do that, to build that sense of community, is start with yourself first and then have that conversation. Don't be afraid to have, to talk about the unknown or something that makes you feel uncomfortable. Go and have that conversation. I think I'm beginning to see some of those things here in our district and in our community here in Provo, is that we're starting to have those conversations. And I think it's really helping us with the work that we're doing here within our district.
Thank you. Well, Representative Hollins.
Yes.
Let me welcome you
Thank
with the world's biggest apology. You were not the only one who struggled with the technology.
Yes.
And I'm so sorry, and thank you for being so patient to keep working through it. And welcome.
I felt like I was stuck in Zoom purgatory. I couldn't get past it.
You can write a book and tell us all about what it's like there, because none of us want to be there ourselves. maybe we could come to you for just a second to introduce yourself to the group. We've got about 60 people here.
Okay.
And tell us about why this issue of inclusion and safety and belonging in schools is important to you.
Sure. So, as was said earlier, I am Utah State Representative Sandra Hollins. I represent District 23, which is the northwest side of Salt Lake City, Rose Park, Fair Park area. Is the area that I proudly represent. Been in office since 2015, and love my job, love what I do. Um, I can say that this is important to me because um, I'm hearing the horror stories. I'm hearing the horror stories from parents, and I'm hearing the horror stories from our young people, particularly in our school system, and at the college level. Some of the incidents and things that are going on around discrimination, and I can say that it breaks my heart, but I just feel compelled that I need to do something. You know, once you have the information and once you know better, you compelled to try to make a change. And it's very important to me. You know, I've had two daughters that went through the school system, and I know some of the issues they faced in the school system here, discriminations they have faced here, period. And so it is important to me because it is a part of my experience here in the state of Utah. And so I think as we're looking and as we're growing as a state, this needs to be a part of the conversation. Is how do we make sure everyone is included in this state?
Thank you. Right before you got on, we were talking about how some of the issues that have been publicized around Davis County,
Mm-hmm.
including the tragic death of Izzy Teichner, have captivated our state and cause us to reflect that it's not unique to Davis County, that these are issues that every corner of our state wrestles with and needs to address honestly. You and Senator Weiler have teamed up in a way to think about how a state level policy might help our state do some of that awareness building and healing and actual creation of safety. Can you talk about that a little bit? And then Senator Weiler, maybe you can just jump in there too and fill in.
Sure. Part of what we're doing is we're trying to make sure all of our children are safe within our public school system. And so we're looking at ways that can happen. How do we make our children feel safe? How do we make sure that they feel welcome? And how do we collect the data to know that this is happening? And so part of that is what we've working on. And that's just one of the things that I'm working on. I have my hands in several different pots right now, so to say, in 7 different groups that we're working on issues around belonging in our school system. You know, I'm with another group where we're discussing how do we educate parents and make sure that they're able to advocate for their students in the school system. You know, we're looking at our whole education system and how do we make sure our children are receiving proper education around kids, around different cultures, and making sure our kids see each other in the schools. I've been working on another initiative with the trying to push out the Utah Safe app because it's underutilized with a lot of our kids, particularly our kids of color. And one of the categories on there is racism in the school system, where they can report that. So we are able to kind of collect that data. So I have a lot of irons in the pot, as they say, right now, working around this issue. And of course, I am constantly in contact with Brittany, little Izzy's mom, and speaking with her and making sure as I move forward that I have her blessings, since I am doing this in her daughter's name. I just want to make sure I'm doing it right, and I have her approval in all of this and what we're trying to do. Oh,
Thank you for your leadership on that and on all of the things that you just described. And we're getting close to 5:30. Steve, I want to come back to you and ask about how you think or how you might have observed this dynamic of concern among some parents that these conversations about inclusion are somehow are harmful or maybe exclusive themselves. And Esai talked about this a little bit, how we do need ways to see ourselves and in the systems that we operate in and in life, and we need a place to find our identity, and we also need places to bridge identities. And can you talk about how you see parents showing up, maybe in terms of like worry or concern or outright opposition to some of the things we've been talking about?
Yeah, that's a great point, Bill. And Esai, your experiences were very insightful and sad at the same time, to realize, at times you felt so excluded. And I think, there is certainly a pushback, thinking any conversation about bias or, the fact that we all have bias is sometimes met with, well, no, I don't. And I would bring it back to a very easy to see example. I was raised in Orem. So, and then I went to BYU. So I'm blue. And in this state, I was taught that red is the color to hate, right? And so that rivalry between schools is a very healthy thing. And well, maybe not healthy. There's a few people that take it too far and engage in vandalism and things like that. But we have that at all levels. Maybe elementary schools aren't competing with some other elementary school, but by junior high and high school, kids are very aware of that kind of rivalry. And rivalry is fun, good guys, bad guys, cops and robbers, those have always been part of growing up. And I think just identifying and recognizing that, oh yeah, okay, it's not that red is evil. I'm wearing a red shirt today. So, obviously I've gotten past that bias, and my wife went there for law school. So, that is maybe a simplistic example, but we all have those kind of biases, and just simply recognizing and one thing that was said to us early on in our journey when we first adopted our Black children was by another young woman who said, I can always tell, and she was Black herself. She said, I can always tell other Black kids that had white parents. I said, well, how? And she said, because, they are the ones who try to excuse the behavior and they might hear from their parents who, would say, oh, I'm sure they didn't mean it. And that's probably a true statement, but it doesn't matter whether they meant it or not. That's how it was interpreted. That's how it felt, as Esai talked about. That's how it felt for him. And though I'm sure many of those students didn't mean it, that's how it comes across. And I think that's the most important thing, that as becoming aware of this does not invalidate you and your family and your race and your background and your heritage. Instead, it loops you in with everyone else that is your neighbor, classmate, and a part of your community, to acknowledge and recognize we're just all here trying to make it through the best way we can. We're all a product of our upbringing. And, the only way to make it all a better place is to start with us, to start right here and right now.
It's a great closing thought. I want to give each of our panelists a chance to offer one last closing thought in our final minute, as Steve just did. In a sentence, what message would you leave with all of us and our attendees today? And Esai, let's start with you, and then Brian, and we'll wrap up with Representative Hollins.
I guess one statement I want to be left with, that I want to leave the audience with, is I want schools to recognize and acknowledge their students as more than just grades, or just more than a single factor, but as students as a whole. That's what I want to leave the audience with, is please recognize students, recognize who they are, and talk to them.
Awesome, thank you. Brian.
Yeah, in closing, I think the thing that I see the most is patience. To take the time to understand each other, because with the decisiveness that's out there, that I've seen, for example, in school board meetings, our kids are watching our actions. And so when they see adults, their parents, come to a meeting in a very negative way and build upon that, that kind of gives the green light saying, hey, if they can do that, I can do that. And so we're all role models in this. And so let's be civil to each other. Let's treat each other respectfully and to focus on the value of being brothers and sisters and treat each other that way.
Thank you.
One of the things is that we know children are not born racist, and they're not born with hate in their heart. That is a taught behavior, and it's taught at home. And we cannot regulate that, right? We cannot regulate what is taught to children in their homes. But one of the things we can do is teach our children how to be allies. And when they see something that's happening in the school, go to a trusted adult, your parents or whoever that may be, and let them know that this is happening to this child in the school system, and they see what is going on and what is happening. So hopefully that parent will be able to reach out on behalf of that child or reach that child's parent to let them know what is happening and what their child has witnessed. That would be what I think we should be doing in the school system.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. We appreciate your wisdom, your experience, your willingness to share that with us today. Thanks to everybody who joined us for this breakout session. I want to encourage everyone who's here to join United Way and its partners in advocating for a safer, more inclusive, more belonging Utah. And join us in that effort. You can do that on our website. Representative Hollins and Senator Weiler are carrying legislation aimed at creating a greater sense of unity and belonging for all of us. And let's get behind their effort. Thank you all. Have a great night. Be safe. Stay away from COVID and take care, everybody.